Dr. Karen Sutherland joins us now from the University of the Sunshine Coast, from the beautiful sunny coast, to talk about all things social media for business. How are you doing?
Very well. How are you?
Yeah, very, very well. Quite a few issues out there at the moment. The pile on social media is one thing that we talk about all the time. Give us your thoughts on all that.
Well, I mean, I just wish people would behave like they do in person when they're using social media. Because I think they're poles apart. I think a lot of people who go for this sort of pack mentality on social media probably would not do that in person.
Yeah.
So, I just wish people would sort of hold back and just think about the ramifications of it, because there actually are impacts and negative impacts at that. So,
Yeah.
just show some restraint. It's fine to have an opinion, but you don't need to try and damage another person with it.
Let's talk about becoming an expert in your field on social media. LinkedIn's become a really good place to, I suppose, be able to have a look at the articles. And I want to talk to you about some of the tips that we're picking up as we go along our journey here at Ticker as well, when it comes to things like LinkedIn too. But it really is a great place where you can stand out by writing some articles or making some videos where you're giving people advice, because we seem to be moving away from the world of be a salesperson, and actually trying to build up trust through giving really crucial advice.
Absolutely, and that's the thing. It's about building that trust, and you need to build that trust. You need to, over time, show people that you are a valuable and credible source of information, and accurate information at that. So, and LinkedIn's a great platform to do that. But I think what holds people back sometimes is, firstly, are sort of they're scared. Like, they're scared to put themselves out there. They don't know how to put themselves out there, or they think they don't have time to put themselves out there. So
You've got to make time though, don't you? My time is on a Saturday morning, so I will wake up on a Saturday morning. I've written a list through the week of topics that I'd like to talk about, and then I just sit there and start tapping away, and before I know it, I've written 3,000 words that needs to be brought down to 400. The life of a journo. But you have to make time. It's a bit like exercising. It's one of those things that if you just plod along doing your job, you may notice, you may think you're doing a great job, but no one else knows.
But there are hacks around that. So, I mean, for example, if you don't have time, if you're not much of a writer and you don't have time to sit there, because I mean, writing comes easy, for you and me, Aaron, because I think we're used to doing it in our fields. But if you're not much of a writer, there are things like on Google Docs, there's a voice function where you can just talk and it types. Admittedly, it's not 100% accurate, but you can go in later and clean that up. If you could record a video, and then there's services online like rev.com, and they can transcribe it, come back, and then you just play with the words. So you're not sitting trying to like pour out information, and those sorts of...
And there's nothing wrong with a video either, is there? There's nothing wrong with actually doing a Q&A. So one kind of really great tip that Ryan John, our social media guy's given us, and I mean, he doesn't give us many great tips, I'll add, but he's sitting right behind the camera right now, so I can get away with that. But we like to give people compliments here at Ticket, but not too much. But the point is that making a video is a really great way, and you can do a lot of Q&A. So the sorts of questions that you often get from your customers, answer them in video form.
That's a perfect way. So, I mean, even if you thought up, say, the top 5 questions that you get asked, the frequently asked questions, and then do like a 1-minute video, even just on your phone, just giving advice on that. And I think some people too are a bit sort of hesitant to give advice because they're like, well, I'll lose business. But that
takes us right back to my first question to you as well, that pile that you get when you put yourself out. You do get to a stage where you just don't care. Now, when I say you don't care, we all care about, people giving us a hard time when we put ourselves out there. You can't help it. We are human and not made of, cotton or metal, whatever. But you have to be so confident in what you're saying and what you're thinking. And really, when you're writing or you're saying these things, it has to come from the heart. Because if it comes from the heart as opposed to something you're just making up, people will see your passion, people will see how you're feeling, and therefore they're more likely to listen and to not give you a hard time.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're being yourself and you're sharing your knowledge through your experience, how how can anyone really discount that? You can't sort of discount someone's experience because it's so personal. So yeah, so I completely agree with that. And giving general advice, it's actually a magnet to, because that's where you establish your credibility and your knowledge, and then people come to you for more customized advice, and that's what you charge for. So it actually helps to bring people to you by, by establishing your knowledge in a field. Telling someone you've got 20 years experience in a field is great, but show me, don't tell me, show me what you know. And that is
Yeah.
what will to you.
And the
So
one thing I'd say is always beware of the Freudian slip is the other thing too. I think back to a terrible, terrible, terrible thing that happened over the past couple of weeks, which is the murder-suicide of that family in Queensland. Of course, the mum, the children, and then the man who stabbed himself. And the police officer who gave the news conference after, he's actually had to stand aside because social media took a clip of one part of that news conference. What he said wasn't great, I might add, questioning whether the father, they have to keep an open mind. Did the father, was he driven to it, kind of thing, which, whatever it takes, there's absolutely no excuse to pour petrol on your family and to kill them. And he has stepped aside from that. But a bunch of journalists who are watching the whole news conference have said he was really hard done by, because it isn't actually his job to investigate and come up with a conclusion. It's his job to look into absolutely everything, give it to the coroner, and then they come up with it. And what social media did, and the media in general, is they found that one clip of what he said. And this is a man who has had so much experience, has been around for such a long time, did not choose his words carefully enough, did not think about the sensitivity. So much of what police do is about keeping public confidence, particularly on cases like this. And there is now a fear that he'll either lose his job, but he certainly has had to stand aside. What would you say the lessons are from a situation like that in terms of the way social media works? Or would you say that in a situation like that, you live by the sword, you die by the sword, be careful of what you say?
well, I mean, it's sort of, I was surprised that he said that, and I do think it was very insensitive. And yes, there was a pylon over that, but I think even if that was put on, say, television before social media, there would have been quite an outcry. And I think it actually, what he said, if that was his own personal belief, like it just sort of showed an insight. And I know it was like a few words, but like we can't let that sort of those sorts of opinions and views, they're very outdated. And I think I don't agree in any respect that people should be so aggressive on social media and and condemning and death threats and all that sort of stuff is just not, it's not right. But I think it also highlighted, it did amplify what he said to a much greater degree than would have happened if it wasn't for social media, definitely.
Yeah, it is one of those situations where it was incredibly unfortunate. He actually, during the news conference afterwards, went back and tried to really point out that that's not what he was trying to say. That wasn't his personal feeling. I guess the problem is it's such a sensitive issue because we've had this ongoing debate between people like Mark Latham and obviously Rosie Batty, who was also involved in a similar tragedy involving her son some years ago, which shot really the scourge of domestic violence. And the fact that you may think there are two sides to a story, but there's one thing to have a fight in an argument, there's another thing to kill your family. They're really not on the same playing level, and to put them on the same playing level, that I suppose what you're saying is it feeds into that debate. It allows some people to go, well, if the detective said that's the case. And that is also the issue from the listener, isn't it? That we so often don't listen ourselves to an entire interview in context. We listen to what we want to hear.
Yeah, oh, totally. And you can see now, like the reports, there have been interviews with family members, his and hers, and to say that this was not like a snap, like this was an ongoing, ongoing abuse on his part towards her. So, I just think it was unfortunate for that police officer, but you've got to be so careful about your audience and who you're talking to. That's the most important thing. It's about communication and being sensitive to who you're speaking to.
It's also a really good example about how everyone needs to realise these days when it comes to media that when you're in front of the media or in front of a camera, the mic is always on. I think back to a time where, as Bureau Chief at Sky News, I got a really angry phone call from police after a news conference. They didn't realise that we were going live, and so they were kind of used to the 6 p.m. news type of stuff where the cameras would turn up, you'd do the interview, and then the reporters would cut the grab that they wanted later on for a story that ran a minute 30 at night. But the media is changing very quickly and rapidly, and not only was it Sky News broadcasting live, but people using Periscope, people using Facebook. The reason it was an issue is that the police officer started making jokes to the attended press about the case and looked so insensitive that police media thought the best way to get out of this was to ring up Sky News and to say, how dare you guys go live? And we're like, he was standing in front of cameras. What do you think we're doing? Do you think we're just hanging around, having fun? Do you think this is mates? Like, he's doing a job. He's stuffed up. And that lesson for me was, we're now at this really crucial time where the old school world of gentleman agreements, etc., are out the door. That social media, you will be caught out, so you have to be careful.
Totally. I mean, look, I'm a lecturer in PR, like that's my area, and we were always taught that if you're dealing with the media, assume that everything is on the record. Like, you know, you just don't do that. And if you're behaving in that way, like, I think it's sort of forcing people to actually improve their behaviour, and I don't know if that's such a bad thing. You know?
Yeah, it is good to kind of have a police officer on our shoulder, isn't it? Like for us in the media, we've had Media Watch for some time, and I remember a few years ago, I've never actually been on Media Watch in a bad way, which is kind of sad. I feel like it's a rite of passage. I'll have to try something here on Ticker to get some publicity, but maybe in your segment. But these days, they're not the only police officer, are they? You've got social media constantly watching for things that can be taken out of context. And you do have people who become kind of the over-the-top police who are always looking for things. But I also kind of feel the same way that you do, that you need to be careful of what you do and say. Preventative is better than trying to clean up and coming up with an excuse later down the track that many people don't care about and just simply won't buy.
That's right. And I mean, once it's out there, it's out there. You can't get it back. So if you're sort of, you know, check your behaviour all the time, like, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with being a better person and treating people with respect? Like, I don't see that as a bad thing. I see it as a great evolution in your personal development. I don't know, but that's just me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Dr. Karen Sutherland, appreciate your time. We'll see you on Media Watch.
Oh, no, you won't.
All right, talk to you again next week.